Hello, welcome to Friday Sips Live. You get me again. Dan is in France. As you may know, some of the other work that Dan and I do revolves around the cycling industry, and he is there for our title Slow Guy on the Fast Ride, doing some Tour de France coverage. So if you want to check some of that out, he's sending lots of video back that we're getting put up every day at slowguyonthefastride.com. So if you just can't get enough of missing Dan and want to see him, listen to him talk about bikes. I am here, and I miss drinking on Fridays with you folks, the camera, people behind the camera. And so, oh look, Dan's here from Denmark. Hey Dan. So I miss drinking. I wish Dan was here to drink with me. I didn't put the bottle of Booker's I usually put here. But this morning I was quite grateful. I was grateful for a lot of things, one of which was all the good whiskey that I get to drink. And it got me thinking that while I've never had, I had one bottle of Stag, I guess that's very unicorn. I never had the Pappy stuff or any of that, and I'm just not going to chase it enough or pay enough for it to matter or to ever have a real chance at it. But I'm really grateful for some of these bottles that are sitting here. That I thought, I would pay more than retail for those bottles. I've bought all of these at or very, very close to retail, but I would pay more for some of these bottles. In particular, this Four Roses Small Batch Limited Edition, amazing. This was one of my first purchases when I started routinely spending more than $100 on bottles years ago. Well, not that many years ago, 2019, I think. And I drank the first one, and I had a batch two and drank it. This was my favorite bottle ever until this Russell's came along. And now they're kind of neck and neck. And it's been long enough now that I've had the Kentucky Owl Batch 1 Rye that I don't know. I don't know which one might be the favorite. These three, amazing. A few years ago, I bought this Ardbeg Supernova, if you like peated Scotch. Amazing. Dan and I opened the Ardbeg Supernova. This is a 200 and I think I paid $260 for it, up against the Ardbeg 10, and there's just a vast difference between those. I also had a Lafroig 16 that we opened with the Lafroig 10. Difference, but not as big a difference. This bottle was amazing. And I want to talk too about, let me run through this and we'll talk about what I mean by pay more than retail or more than they're worth. Always wanted one of these old Fitzgerald bottled in bonds, ended up getting the youngest of the batch. It's just delicious. And I paid $80 for it. I'd pay that again and I'd pay more for it. Hey Larry, so if you like wheated bourbon, that's important. I've got this OWA out because I have a bunch of, well, not a bunch, I have 3 or 4 of these screw top ones from the generation of bottles before, and I paid 23 or 28 bucks for them. I paid 60 for 3 of these foil top ones when it looked like we'd never be able to get them again. I don't know that I'd pay 60 again. I probably would if I didn't have any, but I've got 3 of them. But it's a bottle that really, but for the fervor around whiskey and whiskey geeks, it's really a $30 bottle of whiskey at best. But I would pay more than that. I'd pay $45 and $50. And I'll tell you this, I don't think they do it anymore, but you used to could choose when you barrel picked OWA, chill filtered or non-chill filtered. And I had a non-chill filtered OWA store pick from a store called Base Camp, which I think is in Frisco, Colorado. Dan, maybe you can confirm. One of the best bottles of whiskey I ever had was a non-chill filtered OWA. So that's worth the stretch. But let me tell you one more that is. This is a shockingly delicious bottle. And I bought it as a single barrel pick from Hazel's, my store in Boulder. Paid 85 bucks or so. Dan got one too. Shocking how good it is. And these are not old. These are maybe 5 or 6 years old, but they live in those heat-treated warehouses that Brown-Forman and Old Forester use. The depth of flavor, the mouthfeel, the fact that it's 134 proof that just doesn't drink that hot, amazing. And at first I thought, I can't believe I paid $80-something for this very young bottle of whiskey. Now I'd buy all I could get at 80 bucks, and I'd probably pay $100 for one of these bottles. They're that good. I have the rye version, right, up there, if you can see over my shoulder on the shelf. Hadn't opened it yet, but looking forward to that. These are bottles that, I mean, I'm grateful to be able to drink this whiskey. And yeah, they're all kind of expensive in the grand scheme of things, but in the world of whiskey, they're not terribly expensive, and they provide a ton of value. And Larry's here. Larry and I were messaging back and forth earlier today about other hobbies and interests, and it's one of those things where I think there's two ways I look at it. One is when I can't afford the nicest car, I can't afford the nicest house. When there are times where I can afford some of the nicest things of a particular genre, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to spend that money. We have a Practical Still podcast. The podcast mic everybody wants to record their podcast with is a $400 mic. That's a lot of money for a microphone, but I could get that. I can't even get the nicest bike in the world anymore. When you can do that, you got to do it. And when something like the Four Roses Small Batch Limited Edition falls into your view, and yeah, $200 is a whole bunch of money for a small bottle of whiskey that you're going to consume. But in the face of multi-$1,000 bottles, as good as this is, you can't pass that up. And the other thing to look at it when we were talking about that was I heard something the other day that just made a lot of sense. And it was, if you find yourself looking for your good knife or your good pen, it means you have bad ones. Get rid of those. And that really applies to whiskey. Why are we buying $25 bottles of poor sourced whiskey when there's really good bottles that aren't that much more money? I think buying something like those Jack Daniel's bottles we opened up, that's a solid quality bottle that makes you feel good about spending 30 or 40 bucks. But when you can buy something like these, that kind of quality, I don't know about you guys, maybe y'all all have more money than you know what to do with, but I think it's worth that money. Now, one that I don't think falls into that category is Mr. Blanton's. I like Blanton's, and obviously I have a bottle in front of me. I paid money for it. I have two or three more of the regulars and a store pick over there, but the most I've ever paid for a bottle is $62, and that broke my heart to pay $62 for Blanton's. Blanton's is a delicious whiskey at $50 or $55. It's okay at $60, and past that, there's just other things to drink. In fact, Eagle Rare comes from the same place. It's a different mash bill, but frankly, I'm not sure I can tell the few percentage points difference in grains in those two mash bills, and I still find Eagle Rare bottles for, sometimes 30 bucks. They should be 25. So we should think about value not just from the standpoint of what does something cost, but what is the joy that it brings. And, this is $50 worth of joy, and it's not really much joy past that. So I think that's worth thinking about. And I think I've talked too much without drinking. Let's not put that there in case somebody thinks that's the thing. If you get a chance for this, if you like weeded bourbons, so weeded whiskey like Weller, and there's a common history. Pappy sold Old Fitzgerald when he ran things. That was one of the whiskeys he sold. This is the weeded mash bill, rumored to come from that era. I don't have any idea if it's actually the same recipe. I doubt it is, since it was sold to a different distillery. And then the Weller line and/or the Pappy line came out of what Pappy's grandson, Julian Van Winkle, started when he started producing Pappy Van Winkle all those years ago. So they should be relatively similar because they're aiming at the same sort of experience that would have been had when Pappy was around. I don't have any idea if they're not. All I know is I like Weller. I like all the Wellers. I've only ever gotten up to the old Rip Van Winkle 10. I'm not willing to pay for a pour of Pappy anything in a restaurant for a variety of reasons I've discussed before. And I like it all. I even like the inexpensive Weller Special Reserve, which is, again, on that shelf over there. I think it's delicious. But this Old Fitzgerald Bottled and Bond, it's really good. I'd put it against any of these I've had. I'd rather have this than another bottle of Old Rip Van Winkle 10. It's good. And, Bottled and Bond, so it's 100 proof. It's just got so much flavor going. It's fruity. The mouthfeel is luscious. It's approachable. I mean, you could serve it to somebody that really isn't into whiskey, and I think they'd like it. Hello, Ryan. Let's see. Larry and Dan will do some commentary about the tour. Dan's in Denmark, near Copenhagen, or in Copenhagen. So, if you ever get a chance for this, do not pass that up. If, in the vein of the purpose of this visit, if this was $100 or $120, I'd have a hard time passing that up, given how much enjoyment there has been in this bottle. And given that these, which really should be $28 or $30 bottles, are now bringing 100, it's just an easy decision to make. So that's that piece. I should have not poured so much whiskey in there. Let's talk about Russells. So, as you know, hanging out with Dan and I, we are Wild Turkey homers. We like Wild Turkey whiskey. Wild Turkey 101 is our baseline. It's the one we return to if we're not really sure if something's worth something. At some point, if it can't taste better or have a better experience than a $22 bottle of Wild Turkey 101 bourbon, you know, I shouldn't pay any more money for it. But we also love all the other things that come out of that, including the Russells piece, the Russells bourbons and rye. Love the Russells Reserve Rye. This 13-year-old, mind-blowingly good. I paid $75 for it, I believe. It now, I saw one for sale the other day for $500. That's absurd. Don't do that. But if I found one of these for $100, wouldn't even flinch. In fact, they just announced the next edition. There will be another Russells Reserve 13. But I will tell you this, as it relates to things we can get, as good as this is, and it is side by side with the Russell single barrel bourbon that you can get the store offerings for $55 all day long. There's a lot of store picks in those. Side by side, it's a better, more enjoyable whiskey. But given that you can't really find this, and mostly your choice is going to be blind luck and you buy one for retail at $75 or paying $4 for it, it's just tough to beat those Russell's Reserve single barrel bourbons. And they're just available everywhere as far as I know. I don't know anybody that can't get those on a fairly regular basis. Certainly out here you can in Colorado. Don't pass those up. Don't miss on those. As good as a good old Wild Turkey 101. And remember, that's 6, 7, and 8-year-old bourbon that's in a typical release of a Wild Turkey 101. As good as that is at $20-something, a $55 or $60 Russell's Reserve single barrel, unbelievable. But this is one of those that if you get a chance, do not let $25 or $30 or $40 or even $50 or $60 get in the way of that. If this is retail at $75 and you get a chance at $125 or $150, I hate that. I hate paying more, but you won't regret it. It's that good. It is very delicious. Why don't I skip one, because at this rate, I won't make it. So don't miss out on that. That's another one I'd pay more for if given the opportunity. This guy, the Four Roses limited edition small batch. I never really thought I'd get a chance at one of those. And when I did open the bottle for this one, I even said it then, I've never paid secondary prices for a bourbon. I hope I never pay full secondary prices, but if I did, this is one that I'd stretch for. Four Roses bourbon just tastes different than most other bourbons. I don't know why. I've never really gotten super heavy into it, but every time I have one, they're delicious. The small batch select, that's a $60 bottle of bourbon, 6 years old, 104 proof, non-chill filtered, unbelievably good. If you remember, we drank those together. Not a fair comparison. This is just an order of magnitude better than that $60 bottle, but it's $200 retail. They only bring about double that, only $400 secondary. I don't think I'd pay that for it, but if I got a crack at one of these at $300, it'd be really hard to pass it up. This is 12, 14, and 16-year-old whiskey that makes this guy up, and a fairly heavy percentage of 16-year-old whiskey. It's just amazing. You cannot cannot regret this one. So that's one I'd stretch for. If it came along and it was, another 100 on top of retail, and that was my only option, I'd have a hard time saying no. And I don't think any bourbon enthusiast, anybody that enjoys bourbon, would ever regret that. There's some times where you drink something, I think that Old Fitz is probably in this camp, where it's really good, but it isn't life-changing good. It's just better on all dimensions than most whiskeys around that price range. There's some that don't cost quite as much, like the small batch Select, I think, is a whiskey of a quality of that Old Fitz. But then you get to some of these that are it's just so much better. And it's not always age. In this case, I think there's a lot of age, but it's not always age that does it. Remember that, speaking of Russells, Jimmy Russell doesn't think anything more than 8 or 10 years old is worth bothering with bourbon. He likes, that's where the sweet spot is. I think that's correct in a lot of cases. This is not one of those cases. Dan's trying to take everybody's whiskey. Man, that is so good. Here's another little thing that I think is worth thinking about. Sometimes I hear people say, well, I can't pay $200 for that. $50 is my limit. Well, consider a quality over quantity argument. If $50 per bottle is your limit, well, then don't buy 3 other bottles at $50. Take the first 50 and those 3 and buy something like this. And it's a risk, because if I was to have bought this at $200 and it wasn't this good, I'd be disappointed, because that 6-year-old small batch Select is really good on its own. But think of the value in that way. How much value is there in that cabinet, which, by the way, I had to thin the herd and put some in a cabinet in a closet upstairs. But how much value is in 6 extra bottles of something that, it's good. It's just not worthy of stockpiling. There'll always be something as good as a bottle of Eagle Rare sitting around. Why have I got 6 of them? There's always going to be something as good as the Russell's Reserve single barrels. I don't need to have a stack of those. Once in a while, and that's the point of this whole conversation, it's worth stepping up. And this is one of them. You can't miss that. Not very accessible. Not really fair to tease everybody with that. But really good. Let's see. I'm saving the peaty guy for last, and I may not actually even drink any of that because it'll be lost with all this bourbon. So these are available. Lots of clubs are doing these picks. For years and years and years, the Old Forester single barrel program were 90 proof bottles. I don't remember how many, 4 or 5 or 6 of those over the years. They were $45, $50 bottles, delicious. I just would have kept buying those. But then a couple years ago, they changed that. Now there's no 90 proof. There is either 100 proof, I believe it's 100 proof, or barrel proof. And this is the barrel proof version. They're non-chill filtered, which you'll notice a trend of my favorite bottles tend to be non-chill filtered whiskeys. And these are $85, at least it was at Hazel's. It's 134.3 proof. It is amazingly delicious. You cannot pass on these. I know they're expensive for what it is, but try one or find a friend and taste one. This is the only one I've had. Now, there's certainly a possibility they're not all this good, but given the hype around them, I think that's probably not true. I think they're all probably really good, but you gotta try that. I don't understand how such a young whiskey can have the depth of flavor this has. I guess it does come down to the heat cycling of a warehouse, where instead of waiting for the natural seasons to cause the heating and the cooling, which makes the barrel breathe and brings the liquid in and out, they artificially heat and cool those warehouses. And to hasten that process, it's just amazing. And to have 134 proof young whiskey drink this deliciously, I mean, the mouthfeel, let me just have a sip. And that's right after drinking that. It's that good. It tastes really dry after this. I never noticed that whiskey having a dry finish. But the flavor, the mouthfeel holds up next to something that's twice to 3 times its age and 2.5 times its price. That's impressive. Don't pass that up if you have these. And let's see. Yeah, Larry bought 6 or 7 old tubs. Not last year. This year he's not sure why he did that. Same, and I tell you why I did it. I know exactly why I did it, because Jim Beam Distiller's Cut. That's why I did it. Distiller's Cut was a 20 or 22. I bought some of them for $16. That was 100 proof, basically a 100 proof version of Booker's. 5 to 6 years old. On the label says so. 100 proof, not filtered at all, unfiltered. And $20-something. And it really does taste a lot like you put a little water in some Booker's. I bought a bunch of those. Dan and I both like them. So when Old Tub came out, Repeal Batch was the same. I grabbed a bottle of Repeal Batch, same thing, but at a lower proof. It's good, but it's good for a $14 bottle of bourbon. It didn't have that depth of flavor, that mouthfeel. I hoped Old Tub would, because it's back at 100 proof and bottled in bond. And there was always an Old Tub. That was an early name used by Jacob Beam, I think. And it's good. It's okay. It's just nothing like that Distiller's Cut. That was a rare instance where a very inexpensive bottle was just that tasty. So yeah, same, Larry. I've got 2 or 3 of those left. Don't really know what I'm going to do with them. They're okay. I don't enjoy drinking them neat. And I have a thing where people will go, well, I don't like it as a bourbon. It's kind of crap. I'll make cocktails out of it. Well, that just makes a crap cocktail. So I make my cocktails. I don't make cocktails. I made one old fashioned out of that just so I could say I did it. But I'll use good whiskey for cocktails. So I don't know. Maybe I'll make eggnog out of it. That hides it pretty well. But that's exactly the point. That's the whole. If you're waiting to drink your good whiskey, that means you've got bad whiskey. Nobody needs bad whiskey. Bad whiskey's bad. It doesn't matter what you do with it. So that's impressive or important. No kidding. Don't pass on that. And frankly, if I had to pay $100 for this, I would again and take a chance that it was as good as this bottle. This is delicious. Dan probably will back me up because I think he drank his in like 3 days. He didn't have it for long. And I didn't get any of his. I've shared mine with him since he finished his off. Yeah, Dan doesn't like Old Tub. Dan doesn't like a lot of things. He doesn't like Weller Special Reserve. He's kind of a bourbon snob. All right, so that was what I wanted to talk about today. Think about what we're doing. The price of whiskey is ridiculous. It is not even remotely correct to assume the price of a bottle is indicative of that bottle's quality. There are very good bottles that don't cost a lot of money. The Four Roses Small Batch Select, Old Forester 1920. These single barrels, when you can occasionally get one of these for $60. There's just a lot of good, any of the Russell stuff. And there's also very expensive bottles that, and Dan can back me up on this, he's paid for a lot of bottles lately that we've sipped on that were just not very good. Most recently, a Cream of Kentucky bottled in bond rye that should have been delicious. It was one of the worst things I've ever tasted in my life. You got to do the research. You got to listen to people whose palates you trust. You got to spend a little money and take a shot sometimes. Sometimes you got to buy a pour in a restaurant to find out. You got to try that. This is not the area to skimp. We should all stop buying cases of crappy whiskey because it's cheap. Let's don't do that. Let's buy good stuff that is enjoyable, even if it costs a little more, as long as that value proposition is there, as long as it's enjoyable as these ones I pulled out. And these just happen to be the ones that I had on the shelf at the moment. There are other examples. And also recently, I think living up to that hype or living up to that advice on my own, I recently took a bottle of Rock Hill Farms, which I've had for 2 or 3 years on the shelf. I paid $75 for. Those are up to $300+ a bottle. And I thought, you know what? That is basically 100 proof Blantons. I'm pretty sure I know what that's going to taste like. It probably tastes good. It does not taste $300 good. And I turned that into 2 bottles of Booker's, let's see, what was it? A Knob Creek Store Pick and a High West Rendezvous. So a 1 to 4. I took a bottle of Stag Junior. Everybody's going to cringe because how could you let a Stag Junior go? Well, I've had plenty of them. They're delicious. At $65 or $70, I'll keep buying them. That bottle, even a not very desired batch 13, was worth $240 or $50. I turned that into another bottle of Booker's, Russell's Reserve Single Barrel Rye, and a Wild Turkey Rare Breed Bourbon. I made a choice. There are quality, delicious whiskeys that I enjoy every bit as much as either of those 2 bottles that I could get multiples of. So more enjoyment. So try thinking about it that way. Let's see what we got before we go. Yeah, that's true, Larry. I think Larry's making the point that there's not, it should make a distinction between crappy and average. I think at this point I'm probably associating average with crap. But it's the same, I think it's the same principle, but true. You know, I don't think any of us are probably buying crappy whiskey. But we're buying average stuff that we don't have any reason to stockpile it. There's always going to be an average bottle around the drink, and that's just the point. So enjoy the whiskey. I hope this was helpful. I really appreciate Larry and Ryan and Dan. It's very late for Dan right now. What is it, Dan? 10, 11 o'clock at night? So very late for Dan, so I'm glad he's there. I hope you found some whiskey somewhere in Copenhagen to have a sip. And again, if you missed Dan, slowguyonthefastride.com. Check out the stories he's writing covering the Tour de France. It's 11 o'clock there, and he's very sleepy. I'm very sleepy too, so because somebody edits all that video, so I've been staying up late, and I'm old, and staying up late is very difficult for me. So it's been fun. And he's probably not drunk, Larry. Larry thinks Dan's drunk. But this has been good. So think about it. Buy the quality whiskey. Let a few go that don't matter. Save that money for some that do. Be selective about that and share it. It's no fun unless you share it. This is the only way I have to share today is via this stream, but hopefully my buddy Dan will be back soon. We'll share together next Friday with everybody. I gotta have something to cheers everybody with on the way out. And check out the website, thepracticalstill.com. We still have some podcasts going. Hopefully we'll do some more of those soon. There's plenty of videos, the open the bottle, the back to the bottles. Of course, you can find these recordings of this thing here if you missed it live or you have friends you want to share it with. We'd appreciate that. And we thank everybody so much for being here. Cheers.